don't, can we start again, please? Don't worry too much if you don't completely understand these things, because they are concentrated. They are only providing an overview of what is going on. If we are talking about social choice, there is a very complex pattern behind it. But what it basically means is we know, even if we are very individualistic in our orientation, we know about what is going on in our surrounding, in our society. And if everybody goes for holidays into a foreign country, we want to do the same. Even if it is not rational, there is this social choice. And then we have another dimension of social choice, and this is why you cannot really understand the complexity behind it. You have another dimension of social choice that you have, of course, decisions that are taken against individuals, against individual welfare functions, in favor of communities, in favor of the supply with goods, not for individual benefit, but for the wider benefit. And this actually brings me to another dimension of what we are talking about. And it is linked in some way, this third dimension, after perspectives on economics and paradigms, after Pareto optimum. It is the question of demand. We are producing and we are moving on a market that is very much about what is demanded. I mentioned frequently, commodities are not simply goods, items. It's not about what we do. We care for others. But it is about commodities, commodified products, commodified items that are for us in economics not of any interest in terms of their use value, but in stricto sensu only interesting in terms of their exchange value. This is what interests us as economists. Of course, there has to be use value, otherwise we won't find anybody who buys it. But we are interested in what do we get out of it. Aggregate demand, we talked about this. Aggregate demand is one of the major things why we produce. And this aggregate demand is influenced, it's not just how much or what people want to buy, want to consume, want to invest, but there are in particular three main factors that determine this aggregate demand. And of course, you have to understand again that we are looking at a simplified model of somebody, one person, one individual, wants to buy one good. And this decision is influenced by, in particular, three factors, namely the interest rate, the interest rate is the money we pay, the rate of the money we pay to borrow money. And of course, if it is cheap to borrow money from the bank, we do this, we take the money. The assumption there is, of course, that we don't have the money. We are not these, we are these. We don't have the money available, so we need a loan. We go to the bank and we get the money. And we have to pay for getting this money. It does not apply to those who have a huge amount of income. And it does actually not apply to those who have a very, very low income, because they won't get a loan. But it applies to those who have a reasonable amount of monthly income from which they can repay their loan. And then, of course, you have at least these three patterns. Interest rate. We are talking about the interest rate effect on aggregate demand. This is not relevant. This person has enough and doesn't really have to go to the bank and get a loan. So the interest rate for this person is not relevant. We come later back to it because in some way it is relevant, but not as consumer. Now we have two settings. Interest rate. The interest rate is very high, and the interest rate is very low. What do we do if we want to get a loan? We like these people working at the bank. They are really nice people, so we wait that the interest rate is high to support them with money. Of course not. We wait that the interest rate is very low, that the money is cheap for us, and we get a loan. Terms and conditions apply, meaning it is about time. Do we get a loan for 1 month or 1 year or 10 years? The interest rate will vary. There is a certain stability. We cannot rely completely on it. It may be a different rate next year, next month, or in 10 years. But this is why we make contracts, and this is why you have to learn about contracts, that you go to the bank and you say the money for 10 years, and this is the interest rate. Don't change it. As I say, terms and conditions apply, because usually the bank will have some way of changing it during this time, but at least you are relatively safe, depending on the contract. Always go with your solicitor to the bank if you do any business with them. I said this person, having enough income, is not really interested in the interest rate. But I said as well as consumer. Because this person has so much money that she will not be able to spend it, to consume it, to invest it. So what happens? This person will invest it and bring it to the bank. Invest it in financial assets, will invest it into financial instruments, and expects to get money from this. And in this way, there is this interest as well in terms of, or looking at the interest rate. I want to get this interest rate, I want to get much for it. If I borrow the money to the bank, if I give a loan, and I want to have a low interest rate if I take the loan. And all this influences the aggregate demand. If money is cheap, in inverted commas, I will take out the loan. It means as well that the risk per investment, the risk of loss, is relatively low. I may buy a machine and lose the machine and lose a little bit more meaning what I paid for the money, for the loan. Here I make a huge additional loss. I don't lose only the machine, only the investment, but the bank still asks me to repay the loan. So it is a high risk. Then there's something else, and we talked about the wealth effect. And it is this simple thing. We talked about liquidity preference as well, and we talked about behavior. If I have the impression that I am wealthy, if I have the impression as individual, or if I have the impression I live in a wealthy society, in a stable economic development, my job is secure because the society is wealthy. What will I do? I will buy. What does it mean? The aggregate demand is increasing. You see how simple-minded economy is. What is, if this is not the case, if the conditions are not stable, I will keep back. There you have actually a somewhat interesting thing, and you have to think about it as well, that all these factors are interlinked again. If I live in a wealthy surrounding, if there is the social choice of you need foreign holidays, you need a car, you need this and that. If I don't have the money, what do? I go to the bank. Dear bank, I need a loan. On my own, I wouldn't do it. But social choice in some way obliges me to follow the others. So it's not only my own consumption and my own perception of wealth and my real wealth, but it is as well this push towards, if you cannot afford it, still do it, get a loan out of the bank. And then we talked about as well something else. We are not alone on this world. That means as well that we are, or our economies, and this can be the individual enterprise, or it can be the national economy, is interacting with other economies, with other countries. So we have the net export that is relevant as well. And we have, as such, looking at the aggregate demand development, the net export effect. How much can we export, net export, that we can sell to other countries to increase our aggregate demand? As I said, it is relevant for an individual enterprise that may have to import raw material from somewhere, that may have to import some bits that go into the final product. But overall, the orientation of this enterprise is they want to go and export things. And then you see another link. If I can expect another country, the country of my export, the destination, to be rich, to be wealthy, wealth effect, what happens? I say, great. This is the market where I go. I cannot sell it here, but there is a huge market and I can export it and I can gain. And this means the aggregate demand is increasing. Very simple. And as simple as it is, you always have to keep in mind, and this is the difficult one, you have to keep in mind that these different aspects are interlinked. What we do, of course, is we try, at least, to look at one item. We look at the net export. We look at the interest rate. We look at the wealth effect. And it is difficult then to find a calculation, even today, with the modern machines, computers. It is difficult to find a formula that allows us to understand it altogether, integrate it. Still, in some way, this is one of the simple questions where economics made huge progresses in terms of coming up with different formulas of integrating different factors. Marginality, opportunity cost over time, interest rate, who sets the interest rate, what is with the money supply, aggregate money supply, and so on. There are many things you can integrate into these calculations. If you like it, it's very simple. If you don't like it, it's still simple. And what you have to do, you have to be quick. If you really want to make profit out of it, you have to be quick, because somebody else may be quicker with the calculations, and this is then a problem for you, because the profit is gone. But looking at the overall perspective, we have a fourth problem. After paradigms, after looking at Pareto optimum and welfare issues, and after looking at the aggregate demand, you may actually suspect something from the way I'm saying this, or from the way what I said. We are talking about aggregate demand. Of course, what we have to do is we have to talk about aggregate supply as well. You can look this up if you want. It's too simple to waste the time here. And we will look at the unresolved question of the hen and the egg. And you probably all know what it is about. Does anybody have the answer? Who was first, the hen or the egg? The hen or the egg? The egg or the hen? Supply or demand? As I said, economics, and it is linked to economy, to the development of economies, is not least something that is contested. And where economists, thinkers in this field, have been linking and explaining or trying to explain what is going on in their period of time, in their era. And you may remember the name of one of them, and that was Jean-Baptiste Say. Jean-Baptiste Say came up with the idea at a time, or reflecting what was going on at his time, of an industrializing society. If we look at the economic circle. And this was the understanding of what is going on in economics, and still is the understanding. It is a circle of exchange of supply and demand. You can look at it as somebody else did, Kenne. You can look at it like the human body. There is no one part of the body that can exist without the other. And you have different circles within it. You have nerves, you have blood circulation, you have all this, supporting and maintaining the system. But still, you need something, you have to start somewhere. If you analyze this, if you try to understand it. And part of the story at Say's time was the economy we have now. And we talked about in the third session about this. The economy we have now has this potential of developing itself, of moving to a system where actually supply is enough, supplying of goods, which means production of goods, is enough to develop, to drive the economic process. The idea was you need a barter economy in some way, a developed barter economy, where exchange takes immediately place, where people produce and at the same time they exchange it against some other goods. You need flexible prices. This is what drives the economic process as well. You need flexible prices that immediately react. If I supply more, this means there is an influence on the price. And this is, to some extent, a contradictory process, because on the one hand, I produce more because I can sell more. At the same time, I change my own price to the negative side because I produce more and press the price downwards. And this is, the last point is why I said it was at a certain time, that he reflected on a system against intervention. There should not be any intervention by the state or by any institution trying to influence the process of production. Leave it to the producer, meaning leave it to the supplier. Always be aware of the wording. In some instances, it is just a different way of naming something. Leave it to the supplier, to the producer to decide. And the idea behind it is, as more as you produce, as more you will be able to sell. It is quite easy to understand, isn't it? If I produce, there is this kind of natural demand. We have to consume, and we want to consume. Some things we simply need, and we can only get them on the market. We have to buy them. That's the only way to get them. And some things we don't really need, but we want to have them. For whatever reason, social choice, for instance. Everybody has it, I want to have it as well. I feel obliged to buy something because I support something special with it. I want to buy things from the cooperative, because I think it's good to have a cooperative rather than an individual monopolist enterprise. So I may pay a little bit more. But there's one problem with it. In order to be able to buy things on the market, whatever the price is, high-priced good, low-priced good, I need money. From where do I get the money? From the bank. They have money enough. But if you really want to go to the bank, they will ask you, and how do you want to pay it back? And then you say, well, I hope to find some money some stage on the street. Oh, well, no, forget it, you won't get it. Well, but I'm playing lotto or something like this. I would say, no, it's not security. And then you say, but I have a job. That's a good reason. And actually, if you have a job, you may not even have to go to the bank because you have income and you can buy the products you produce, or you buy the product somebody else produces in a different enterprise. So you have this drive to increase economic activities, and then you can come up with GDP and all these things, and again with aggregate demand and aggregate supply. But here you start from the side of aggregate supply. Get the stuff out there, and somebody will buy it. And because people buy it, they need money and they will get work. And because they are working, I can produce more. Which means I can sell more, because there is this balance. Now we forgot something, namely the hen and the egg. But we say actually here, we are not on a farm, but we are talking about supply and demand, and it is the supply, according to Jean-Baptiste Say, the supply that is there first. First supply the goods, and then you will find somebody who buys them, not least because this person needs the money, you can produce the goods. So you have this circle in this respect. It is the reflection of time, meaning the era in which we are located with our thinking, and it is the idea of a developing industrializing society where you have the development of markets in terms of demand side. But you enter this via the supply side. In a way, you can say as well, Say didn't have to worry about the demand side because demand was there. And he could rely on the fact that if enterprises supply more goods, there will be somebody able and willing to buy them. If not, bad luck, this happens, of course, but the self-regulating mechanism, no intervention, is moving towards a growing economy. And this worked. Magically, it worked. There had been some crisis in the middle of it. There had been one major crisis in 1914, when there was no demand. And people supplied, but there was no demand. But even this found a solution. War. War was a mechanism of increasing demand. As simple as that. if there are no private consumers buying the stuff, and of course you produce what is sold, what you can sell, if you cannot sell private cars, if you cannot sell jackets or shirts or computers that didn't exist at the time, what do you produce? Tanks, guns, and all this. It worked. And then you have had afterwards some severe political changes, but as well changes in terms of production, namely Fordism, Taylorism, organizing the process in a different way, and producing now, and this was a decisive thing, producing mass products for mass consumption. Ford's automobile was geared to this idea of a mass product, meaning not everybody, but a majority of the population should be able and willing to buy this thing. It worked. It worked so well that we find as well actually a concentration and centralization of capital. We find an early development and emergence of finance capital that could not be invested in the productive sphere. And then there came the year 1929, and there was this one black day, and somebody wanted to have the money out of the bank, and the bank said, sorry, we don't have it. We can't pay. To be open and frank, we are bankrupt. And this, the one customer, let's dramatize it a little bit, the one customer said it to others. And the others said it to others. And everybody went to the bank and said, there's a problem, behavior. There's a problem. Get the bank. Make sure that you go to the bank. Get sure that you get the money out of the bank, because they are apparently bankrupt. And of course, what happened? All banks went bankrupt. Now, this is a simplified model, but this is where you have behavior and where you have the system of supply doesn't work because there is not enough demand in the long run. Because you have, and we will come back to this later, you have this problem that actually you produce too much money and not enough return in terms of income for the workers. They cannot buy. Export, we talked about the effect of export on the aggregate demand. Export is something that works for some time, but again you have this problem. It is not, in the long term, it is not endless where you can go this way. And then Mr. Keynes came up with this great idea, and it was a great idea. We have to do something about it. We went once to war. It started in Germany, but it doesn't matter. It was a world war. We went to war, and this is something we don't want to get. And Keynes was not a politician, although he was involved and into politics. He was drawn into it and called for. He said, what we have to do we have to stimulate demand. And we don't want to do it via another war. Now, you can be very cynical and say the war was a project supporting the demand side. But now we want to do it in terms of civil production, meaning what do? We increase demand. Two ways. State investment, anti-cyclically. If there is a turn down of the demand, we try against this cycle, we try to develop it. We increase the demand. We tell the state basically, now it is the time, we know of course you don't have money, get money, spend it, and at some stage this money will come back to you. And then it's getting more or less complicated. How can the state get money? And then you have already there and again there these different instruments of bonds and all these things, financial instruments that allow the state to make use of the money that is out there. The problem is not that there is no money or not enough money. The problem is the distribution of the money. So you have to get hold of the money that is there and make it used going back into the consumption. We talked about inequality. And I said there that one of the major points within capitalist economy is the middle class. These people are potential buyers. It is here where you find the demand. Here, they have so much money. Of course, they buy this. But all this money is going into saving accounts, into bonds, into hedge funds, and all these beautiful things without being used. These people here at the bottom, they cannot really consume. They spend all their money for what they need. And if they are lucky enough, they arrive at the end of the week or the month and still have at least no debt. Here, you have the people who can consume. So what Keynes said, we have to increase the consumption here. And we do it in two ways. A, the state will invest into project, multiplier effect, we talked about this. We'll build roads, we'll build schools, we'll build hospitals, we'll build parks. Parks are not useful in terms of exchange. You don't get money back from the park. Sometimes you get, because you have to pay entrance fee. But you have this multiplier effect. The trees have to be planted, there is a gardener going there, and. And you have two positive effects. People enjoy walking there, and people are employed, and they pay taxes, and they buy products, and you have demand. State projects, and of course, you say immediately, get people into work. Support them to find work. So if you look at the title of this book, it is exactly looking at this. Make it possible for people to work in order of increasing demand. And if there is demand, then of course supply will follow. So you have a completely different concept. You start on the one side, in the one case, with supply, free market, no intervention. You start in the other case with demand and say, if there is not demand automatically there, we will increase it, we will intervene into the economic process, and at the end of the day, even if we spend now the money we don't have, we get it back at some stage. And if you follow this, you will get it back at some stage in terms of good results of your exams. Thank you.